What's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode 5 of the Gen B podcast. I'm Evan with my friend David here. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk about the strategic Bitcoin reserve that was announced on Friday by the US, the United States. It was truthfully a pretty historic event, I would say, in the history of Bitcoin, which we'll get into. We'll talk pretty high level about that. But before we get into that, was there anything you wanted to talk about, David, before we jump in?
Maybe just call out price. So price is at 82,200 right now, which I think is the lowest since we've started recording this about a month ago. Always a lot to talk about when price is dipping. There's always a lot to talk about in general, but I feel like panic is in the air and people want to know what's going on.
Yeah. I think I speak on your behalf, Dave. Our opinion with what the price is at right now is it's makes zero sense and is absolutely ridiculous. But the markets will do what it'll do, and Bitcoin is going to do what it's going to do. And yeah, right now it dropped a bit this past week after hearing this bullish news. So, um, you know, we'll just get into it. David, do you want to start by just explaining what the strategic Bitcoin reserve is that the U.S. announced? And we'll go from
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, we recorded last week just to set the stage. Trump had, I think, tweeted on Sunday that they were looking at a digital asset stockpile and they were including, and he mentioned by name like XRP, Solana, ETH, maybe not even ETH in the first one. ADA, I think, was the other coin. And then there was like a pushback on Bitcoin Twitter, like, how are we not even going to mention Bitcoin? And he tweeted again, like, oh, of course, Bitcoin and ETH are going to be in there too. So we recorded last week, and I guess the summary of that was this should probably only be Bitcoin only. Like, we talked about the reasons why you even want a strategic reserve and how that just kind of protects you as like a hedge for the future against currencies. But we're like, at the end of the day, like having these other coins in there, I guess is fine. Like Bitcoin will end up outperforming the other ones most likely, so it doesn't really matter. And then on Friday, kind of out of the blue, I think it was Thursday night, actually, it was announced. So initially there was discussion of like a crypto summit happening at the White House on Friday. So I think a lot of people were thinking Friday is when we'll get some big news potentially. But it actually came Thursday night that Trump signed an executive order creating, and I'm reading off like their fact sheet about the executive order, creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile. So those are two different things. I think that's the most important thing that came out of this is first, he created a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So they're taking the Bitcoin that the government already has in its possession, which they got via really confiscating it from like illegal activities. So they've never bought Bitcoin before. They've just confiscated it. So they're saying, we're going to turn this Bitcoin that we have into a strategic reserve and not sell it. And there was direct allusion to the Biden administration having sold Bitcoin, I think last year in 2024, which David Sachs, Trump's crypto and AI czar, said has cost taxpayers $17 billion. I don't know exactly what that means about like how that cost taxpayers really, because they didn't pay for anything. But his point was by selling that, we lost out on basically $17 billion in gains that would have happened had we like kept whatever was sold. So yeah, they're keeping what was already confiscated, around 200,000 Bitcoin, I believe. And then they were saying we're also encouraging the Secretary of Treasury and Commerce to develop budget neutral strategies to purchase more Bitcoin. So they're saying we're not going to like use taxpayer dollars in any way, but there are tools available to like the Treasury to figure out how we could add this to the US balance sheet. So again, Bitcoin reserve as its own thing. And then you have the digital asset stockpile, which is those other things, XRP, ADA, ETH, everything but Bitcoin, where they're saying we're going to hold what we've already confiscated, but we're not purchasing anymore either, which is super interesting. And I think in line with what we would agree is the right way to approach this. We can get into why and what that all means, but want to hear your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, in terms of in the world of crypto, this has got to be one of the most impactful events to ever happen. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
United States just put their stamp of truthfully their stamp of approval on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They're sitting here saying that we're like this is a legitimate asset that we believe is and can grow in value over time, and it's in the country's best interest to own some of this. I mean, if for someone out there that doesn't know about Bitcoin or own Bitcoin, I mean, what more do you need to see before you start learning, let alone buying some? Clearly, it's the government feels that this is a great that this is an asset that's worth having on behalf of like our country. I mean, what
Yeah,
bigger?
whether you believe in it personally or not, the US government, the biggest economy in the world, is saying, we think this is valuable. Even if you have
Right.
your own personal arguments, I don't know how you argue against that big of an entity with that much money literally saying, we're going to find ways to buy more Bitcoin.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I know that like it's I'm trying to think of it from a lot of this podcast is with the thought of someone that's listening is someone that doesn't know much about Bitcoin or have any hit. So I'm trying to think of it from that perspective because like to get deeper into it, there are some Bitcoiners out there that like some people that just understand the markets more that I think are I don't know, I guess getting a little more technical with it, but from just like a bigger picture point of view, at least from my where I see things, yeah, this is a big deal. And the fact that the price has done what it's done over the past few days. Again, if you're gonna buy Bitcoin, you own it for the long haul, and this price decrease is just like how we see it is just another great opportunity to buy it.
Yeah, and we were talking about, I think I saw a tweet from somebody. It says there's kind of three types of like everyday people, I guess, when it comes to an announcement like this announcement specifically. First, there's people who don't even know that a Bitcoin strategic reserve was announced. So like that's probably a bigger percentage of people than we actually think because we're so in the weeds of this. Like that's probably a big group of folks. The next one is people who are in crypto or Bitcoin looking for dollar returns and probably earlier in their journey where it's like, oh, there's the US is going to announce it's into Bitcoin, price is probably going to skyrocket up. And then it doesn't. So they're freaked out, I bet, because they've either never been in this before or are maybe just less confident in it because they thought price would go up. And why isn't it? This doesn't make sense. So there must be something wrong with this. And then there's third, which I think we probably fall into, who are like the people who have like spent a lot of time like understanding Bitcoin, are passionate about it, and are feeling this is maybe the most bullish thing that's ever happened in Bitcoin's history. And there's been a good amount of history at this point. So I'm looking at a tweet on screen from the White House yesterday. America will be the Bitcoin superpower of the world. Like
Right.
they're telling you exactly how they feel. And again, if you're in bucket 1 or 2, time to enter bucket 3, or at least take some steps to like learning why people are so bullish about this, including our government now.
Yeah. It's and the thing I'm going back and forth on is to us, like you said, like we're very much in the thick of it. So we're like, this is so in your face, like in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how much more do you want to see to know that this is a legitimate asset that but yeah, I think it's for the average person, it should be that doesn't spend their time doing research on Bitcoin. This should be enough to say, oh, like this is again, it's just it this Bitcoin was the most legitimate, let's just call it cryptocurrency out there before this announcement, but this just put the icing on the cake.
This is like the nail in the coffin, honestly, of other crypto because, I mean, we've seen it. We get a lot of people from other communities commenting on our TikToks and stuff saying why Bitcoin is trash and why whatever their crypto is good. The government just said you're wrong. And again, you can have your opinion. Like, we're totally about people making money. Like, if that's your shtick in this, like you're just trying to make more US dollars, be our guest. Obviously, we think Bitcoin's a lot bigger than that, but it's just hard for me. And you're right, like we're deeper in this, obviously, but it's hard for me to wrap my head around. You have the richest country in the world making all these statements saying we're going to be the Bitcoin superpower of the world. What does
And it's
that do
coming
to the rest of the world? Like, that's what we were talking about. I think that's the most exciting thing is like, how does someone like China respond to this? Like, we're in a global economy right now that is shifting and is seemingly getting more competitive than it has been in recent years. Like there's more friction country to country and like shifting alliances. Like this definitely is a wrench in everything that other countries have to consider. And I've already seen it. Like I think Belarus's president, don't know anything about Belarus, but he said they have a lot of electricity and want to look into mining potentially. You have a country like El Salvador that was already buying. It's one thing when those smaller countries say it. It's a complete paradigm shift when the United States says it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this totally, and this is more for people that have been in it or deeper into Bitcoin, but this is when ultimate game theory just starts
Mm-hmm.
playing out, where it's like, okay, the US just announced that we're coming at this thing full throttle, basically, more or less. And now it's okay, other countries are gonna like after that this happened on Friday, you have got to imagine that, like you said, countries there was rumors that China was already kind of looking into growing a stockpile of Bitcoin, but um, countries that haven't certainly are now. So it's like, again, we've said it on just about every episode, but there are only 21. There's no other asset that everybody in the world can have access to, meaning not just not just the wealthy, not just the governments, like anybody can buy Bitcoin. That's like the beauty of it, is that people like David and myself and anyone else out there can buy Bitcoin. You don't have to get to one whole Bitcoin. You can buy little fractions of Bitcoin, and that's you're still owning like that's still an asset. Like just because you don't own one doesn't mean you're not like it's not like owning one house versus a fraction of it. Like that doesn't even really exist. But like you get what I'm saying, is it's like every human being has an opportunity to buy this asset that all these other countries are going to be, in my opinion, aggressively going to be looking into getting now that, the US has kind of made this move, which
When
is
we
really
tweeted
unique.
out, yeah, no, super unique. And we tweeted out, will you be able to say you bought Bitcoin before the US government did? Like, how crazy is that? That's still an opportunity. They've already announced, they already told you what they're going to be doing, right? We're going to be the Bitcoin superpower. We're holding the Bitcoin we already have and we're not selling it. We're going to figure out how to buy more. Who knows how long it'll take to buy more? It could be a month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. They told you they're going to be buying more and prices down. People still are selling instead of buying. Like it actually just kind of blows your mind from like a rational perspective that that's what people are doing. Like I really don't understand how you sell right now. I get maybe not buying if you don't have money, but how do you sell at like
Yeah.
this volume?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because after this like after the reserve was announced, I think the majority of people were on Friday were like, okay, like prices got to go up, and it did the opposite, which
Well, a lot of
obviously,
people thought because they didn't read like the full statement, there was like bearishness in that the US didn't buy. I think there was expectation saying we're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin over the next 5 years, which they didn't say it that explicitly, but like they still said they were going to buy. And I think people also missed that they even said they were going to buy. They've only read that they were just keeping what they already had. But I guess they would have had time to like understand it better in the last few days and price has gone even lower. So sorry, I think I interrupted you too. If you had another point on it.
no, it's just I think at least from what I gathered looking on social media just throughout the weekend, is there's a handful of reasons why people think that the price has gone down now. Part of it is, okay, there's still a lot of uncertainty in terms of just overall market
Yeah.
conditions, just with, again, the continued tariffs that are one day on, one day off. Basically uncertainty is what a lot, and again, I don't know how the bigger markets work, like these market makers that are like truly pushing this price down at the moment, or
Hmm.
I don't know how all of that works, but if I had to imagine, they hear that news, they go, shit, like we only have a matter of time before like we can suppress price for as long as we can. So like let's give this thing one more shot down, try and scare people out, get as much Bitcoin as possible, and just like send this
That's
thing.
actually it's hilarious you say that. You're a real Bitcoin savant and content creator because Joe Burnett basically tweeted that out today, and I liked it just so we could reference it. Zoom in here. But he's saying, or I can't, but Trump admin 40 chest. Number one, tighten liquidity, causes the NASDAQ to fall 10%. Announce SBR, lack of liquidity leads to muted price action, begin accumulating Bitcoin, tighten liquidity even further if Bitcoin runs, and then maximize Bitcoin buys. So it's basically what you're saying. It's like, all right, now that we're doing this, like, let's get some cheap Bitcoin while we still can. And they have the tools to limit liquidity. That's what's happening with like rates and everything. So yeah, I don't know. Somebody responded to this like it's not all about Bitcoin, so which is fair, but
Yeah,
like you're onto something potentially. Who knows if that's what's happening, but that could explain because it's not normal people selling their Bitcoin that's dropping price to 82.
right. Right. This is like way bigger players that you
Yeah.
and I can't even wrap our heads around of like who's actually like
Well, and
how
that's
these
like
things work.
for your own peace of mind, like you have to know that, right? That my dad has always said it, you're a small fish in a big pond with a lot of other big fish when it comes to a market, whether it's stocks, real estate, whatever. So it's important first to remember that. But I've liked the framing that I've seen on Twitter a couple of times is you should be thinking about starting your own strategic Bitcoin reserve, right? Like how we were saying, like, how does the US making their move impact China? Those are two bigger than whales. I don't even know if there's a fish bigger than a whale, but two whales in the ecosystem that can like influence this price a lot. Obviously, you, me, a normal person working a 9 to 5 like us isn't competing with them, but we can make decisions for ourselves that benefit us as like small fish in this big like money ocean, if you'll call it that, that are gonna maybe help us grow a little bit, or not even using the fish analogy, just like give us a better standard of living. If literally the biggest players in the game are making a decision, and like Evan's saying, Bitcoin is something that you actually can buy 0.0001 if you wanted to do that, seems like not financial advice. It should maybe at least be considered, you know? And I totally agree with you. I think Bitcoin is so unique in that you can buy such a little amount, like you don't have to buy one, whereas you totally do with a house or I don't know. Like there's something about buying in ones. I don't remember the name of it. There's some like psychological thing with humans that we think about things in like one, tens, hundreds that make it so like, yeah, I want to get to one. If I can't get to one, is it really worth it? And we've talked about it. I think that's why people get wrapped up in these other cryptos is they're like, oh, well, Bitcoin used to be $5 and is now 100,000 or whatever it is, 80,000 right now. So I bet Dogecoin or whatever could do that too. But there's no understanding of like what makes Bitcoin so different. Again, we've talked about it. It's scarcity, it's decentralization that have resulted in that these other coins don't have. So I guess just point being is like there's a crazy opportunity for everyday people here. And that's why we're doing this podcast now is to try and get that message out there. And as you were talking about it, I think a lot of the podcast recently and like some of the content we've produced has been focused on people in crypto and trying to like shift them to a Bitcoin mindset, which I think I don't know if that's possible. Like, I don't think we totally even know what impact we're having at this point because we're so early. But I am wondering, is the focus more so the people who are tossing some money in their 401k or trying to save up to buy a house or a second investment property maybe, that we could start to tailor some content to try to get people even outside the crypto space to start to think about this? Because I think that's that first bucket we were talking about is some people don't even know there was a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Like they're not even adjacent to this to the point that they like have any idea of what's going on. But maybe if they did, then that would be enough to get them to at least start to dabble or consider and like make some positive money moves for themselves in relation to this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think anytime that we're filming a podcast, I'm always thinking about, truthfully, that's always top of mind is like, I'm always thinking about people that are not in the crypto space at all and don't know anything about Bitcoin, because that's how I was. I didn't know anything about crypto, and I happened to be led by you to the best of the cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, your story is unique. We were saying you didn't go into like a bunch of shit coins or anything first. You kind of were Bitcoin all in from the get go. That was like your real first leap.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have to go through the fucking mud to like have to find it, which, definitely fortunate. And that's like I think our hope with this podcast is like getting people that have know nothing about cryptocurrency or because again, the name of the game in life is owning assets, right? That's how you build wealth is owning appreciating assets. And for a normal everyday person, that really falls under like you own a house. That's like the goal.
Which is getting way out of reach for people too. Like, so if you, that's one you do need to buy one unit. Like you were saying, you don't buy a room in a house and wait for that to appreciate. So that's really
Right,
hard. You have
right,
stocks, which
right,
I think we should do an episode on like stocks versus Bitcoin because I do think that's a really important one and showing the dichotomy or like compare and contrast would go a long
right.
way.
Listen, the majority of the world or the majority of the people in the US own stocks, I would say. And like that's fine if you own stocks, obviously. That's very like that's how a lot of people build their wealth
Do you think
over
people
time.
know why they are buying these things?
No, a lot of it, yeah, we've talked about this. A lot of this is just they do it because a lot of people aren't even buying their own individual stocks. A lot of it's just okay, I get a job and they automatically set me up in a 401k, or I just know that that's what I'm supposed to do.
Hmm.
But good to have. It's fine to have a diversified portfolio. That's like you want to own a home, you want to own stocks. That's where we're talking about. You have an opportunity to potentially own, truthfully, the scarcest asset out there. With real estate, the people that are buying real estate in America are usually people that live in America or live in the state that you're in. Like, whereas again, with Bitcoin, you have people all over the world that are trying to accumulate this thing, and there's a fixed supply of it. So,
Well, and if you need to sell, which like we wouldn't recommend because like this price will probably appreciate a lot in the long run, you have a way bigger market that's 24/7. It's global. You can basically sell on a dime at whatever the market price is. You can do that with stocks, but that's like 9 to 5. So you have some restriction in there in terms of total market. And then real estate, to your point, like how many months and years sometimes does it take to be able to like buy or sell a house?
right, yeah, and that this is probably for another episode, like
Yeah.
going through like Bitcoin versus other assets. But again, going back to what we were discussing, you have an opportunity to own an asset that literally countries are looking to own.
To
So do with
beat
that,
major countries into buying this before them. Like you still have that opportunity.
right, exactly. And so do with that information what you will. But yeah, this past Friday was just an historic day, and I think a lot of people are going to be interested to see like when are they going to announce the first purchase? Are they going to announce the first purchase of Bitcoin? Because for people that don't really understand Bitcoin in general, there's a game theory that's involved, which is because it's such a scarce asset, it's almost in the best interest of, you know, the US where if they do start buying, should they be announcing it? Because if it's so scarce and it's so valuable, wouldn't you want to do it in silence so that way you can get the most and you don't, make noise and allow other countries to catch on to what you're trying to do? So that's part of the game theory that's going on with now that the US has announced this reserve, like if slash when they're going to announce a purchase of actual Bitcoin. And yeah, I mean, interesting times for sure.
Yeah, I think the summary from my perspective is the game has officially changed. Like going forward, that Friday was very much a pivotal moment in the history of Bitcoin. That if there's ever a Bitcoin history book or whatever, like that's going to be pretty high up there in the list of like most important moments in Bitcoin history. We just haven't seen like the consequences like in a positive way from that yet, and that takes time, right? Like I think everything in Bitcoin can be a bit delayed. Like we haven't really even in an episode yet gotten into like the halving cycle and how the supply of Bitcoin is constantly decreasing. Like that takes some time to feel the effects. You see it in markets where more money's printed, it takes time for prices to rise. So That's where patience with this is just so important. We've released content about it that says if you buy and hold Bitcoin for 4 years, price historically has always gone up over that 4 year period, even if you're buying at like an all-time high in a given year. So just really gets to the importance of having a long time horizon. This is a savings vehicle. This isn't a gambling vehicle. Don't go buy Bitcoin if you're trying to double your money in a day. This isn't the place to do that. But if you're trying to save your money against a melting fiat currency that's losing its value and making your life more expensive, we think this is the solution to that.
For sure. And something I also wanted to bring up with this announcement, that so a guy named Adam Back, he's like the most OG Bitcoiner out there. Like he is one of the only known people to have emailed with Satoshi Nakamoto, who essentially created Bitcoin. But he's a very well respected guy in the space, and he tweeted out earlier that he said people are undervaluing the U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve announcement. It is huge for moving the Overton window. The actual U.S. government promoting Bitcoin provides the new ultimate reference for sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, mutual funds to add Bitcoin allocations. And so through that tweet, I was like, what is the Overton window? Never heard of that. And so I was doing research of what that was and what that meant. Essentially, with the Overton window, I'm just going to read it off of this website. The Overton window of political possibilities, the range of ideas the public is willing to consider and accept. So in the United States, the idea of different races mixing in public or women's suffrage were once considered fringe extreme policies. They're now deemed like common sense. It reflects progress in shifting the Overton window. Essentially, in politics, after reading that, what I realized is, he's essentially saying this could be something that in 20 or so years, it's like, how did we, like, of course we bought Bitcoin, as a government. Like, how are we not going to buy the most scarce asset of all time? And, and that got me thinking a lot of just kind of where we're at with this, like with this announcement that happened on Friday. And I think it absolutely did that. We did something that is for sure right for the country. And it's only going to be a matter of time of people being taught what Bitcoin is and its properties and what it can provide for the future, that people, I think, will realize like, oh yeah, it's one of those things that you look back on, you're like, wow, that was a really impactful thing that we did. I
I
don't
think
know.
they nailed it. I think the government nailed it, which is like, I don't feel that way about a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and that, I think that's the, like, if you, for anyone that is in the space, I think you could sit there and be like, yeah, that was like, they made the right move, which, like you said, it's like almost
That
shocking
never
because,
happens. Yeah.
right, which, you could feel whatever way about politics, about Trump, whatever, but his team, when it comes to this, they made the right decision. And
Well, and I do just want to reiterate what to me the right decision was. It was the fact that they separated Bitcoin from all other cryptocurrencies. I don't like it. I'm trying to think how to explain it. Like how they did that is by basically saying, we're going to buy more Bitcoin and we're not going to buy more of these other coins. If they thought the other coins were as valuable as Bitcoin, they would be buying them. And so obviously people on that team who helped formulate this decision and move forward with it understand there are inherent differences between Bitcoin and everything else in the crypto space that make Bitcoin more valuable. You can listen to our previous episodes or look at the content on our social media pages to understand why. But again, when you have an entity as big as the government saying that, with as many studied and like intelligent people on this committee that I would assume there are, and like all the people supporting them, whether it be like Michael Saylor or some other folks, you got to take a look in the mirror, I think, if you're not understanding why, and say, what are they saying that I'm not?
yeah, well, I guess with all that being said, what can people expect next? Like, what's your general thoughts, opinions on what we see over the next few? I mean, we know how we feel long term. At the end of the day, Bitcoin,
I'm just going to
we're
keep
very
it
confident
real.
it's going to go up.
I hate short-term price predictions. Not even price predictions, just like short-term predictions. It's so hard to say, and I feel like we're living in a chaotic time in terms of the market anyway. So like price could go down, like something could happen and price could go up. I think within a year, if you want to call that still shortish term, the US buys in some capacity. I don't know what that looks like how much. I think not only does the US buy, I think we see other countries start buying as well in states too.
Yeah. Yeah. And just going off what you just said, there are a couple states out there, for those that don't know, that are uh, pushing, what would you call it? Like pushing,
Like their own strategic Bitcoin reserve on like a state level though.
right, through, they're going through the political process. I don't know what you would even call that, the
Yeah. I
process
mean,
of
they're
trying.
trying to implement laws, like state
Right.
laws saying they can buy Bitcoin and will.
Right. So I think it was Texas is getting pretty like they're
Hmm.
moving forward. They haven't nothing's passed, but they're getting closer to making a decision on that. I know Florida's been very vocal about wanting to head in that direction. Yeah. So I mean that'll be interesting too. Just if in the future, if because a state owns Bitcoin and another state doesn't, if like that's going to be the reason people move to a certain state, or there's just so much. The future's changing right before our eyes. Like it's hard to, it's easier to look back on it in 20 years and be like, wow. But I think being in this space, you kind of see what could potentially happen here.
Yeah, and just to like reiterate the point about like short-term predictions, even if it's a year, like we could be totally wrong, no one could buy. Like it's really hard to predict things in relation to this. And that's why we do try to like really emphasize the importance of having a long-term mindset with this, because it really shouldn't matter what happens over the next year or two or three or really even four. Like you should be thinking like 10 years plus, like this is a savings vehicle to like save your wealth, like really over the remainder of your life. So if you think about it from that point of view, these short-term fluctuations, good or bad, shouldn't cause you to make like rash decisions where you're chasing price going up and trying to buy in because of FOMO, or you're selling out of fear because price is going down, which is, I think, a lot of times what we see happen. There's always this, I feel like we see it a lot where people are like, oh, I wish I had bought Bitcoin at $5, at $500, at 1,000, 10,000. And that number is just going to keep going up over time. Like the data has shown that's the case. So if you're looking at 82 today and thinking that's too high, people thought that at those other prices that they wish now that they had bought at. So just expand your time horizon, think bigger picture. You're saving for your life, not just trying to gamble to get ahead tomorrow. So I think that's important to remember.
Yeah. If you're looking to make gains like within the next, like basically immediately, just go to the casino then. Is any because that goes for really anything, owning a house, owning stocks, owning Bitcoin. The recommendation is to hold it for as long as you can, because they say the power of compounding. And so if
Mhm.
you want to keep your money in the market, because over time it's just going to grow exponentially.
Yeah, time in the market, not timing the market, right? That's a really famous saying. And I feel like a lot of wealthy people and financial advisors say the same thing. Like it's nearly impossible to time anything or like be accurate because there are so many variables. So it's easier to just set and forget in something that you know is going to grow over time, which again is other assets. Just Bitcoin has proven to grow faster or like better for a myriad of reasons, which is why we're such big fans of it.
For sure. I'm trying to think if there's anything else we didn't really touch on this episode, just for what people can give some people something to think about short term, or
I think I'm good, man. We were saying the big picture is just expand your time horizon. This is a massive announcement that changes the trajectory of Bitcoin in the world going forward. And the sooner you learn that, the better off you're probably going to be in the long run. Not financial advice, but something we believe and try to live by.
Yeah. I think one thing real quick to that we should add, we always talk about, like, not financial advice, but look into buying Bitcoin, do some research. I know I use Strike. I use the app Strike to buy Bitcoin. Maybe one day we'll be sponsored by them, but is there any other platform that you would recommend to people if they're sitting here listening and they're saying, all right, shut up and already. Like I'm gonna buy some Bitcoin. Where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, Strike's a good one. Like, I like Strike as well because it's Bitcoin only. We like Jack Mallers, who's the founder of it. He has a lot of good things to say and is a big proponent for the ecosystem. But I mean, you can use any of these exchanges. Like Coinbase, I feel like is probably the most popular one. It's totally fine to use them. If you are using an exchange, like once you start going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, like you eventually want to figure out how to take self custody of your crypto, because that helps you avoid like any risk of like a Coinbase like being robbed or it's a whole rabbit hole you can go down. But just for beginner purposes, you can really buy it on any of these crypto exchanges. Coinbase, Gemini are the two that stand out to me. I really do like Strike, and probably would say go there just so you're supporting a Bitcoin company if that's important to you. But I just get off zero. That's what a lot of people say is like you can just put $5 in once and then you have something. I think there's totally something to having some skin in the game and having that be a proponent for you to like learn more about it because you're then invested at that point. So yeah, just even if you don't want to learn about it, I think it's fine to throw a little money in there and nothing crazy. And then maybe that'll incentivize you to learn about it because then you own some.
Well said. Well, I think that's all we got for today.
Yeah.
But
Big times. There's a lot of news for us to be covering. I'm sure we're going to have something more next week come up.
yeah, yeah, and there's definitely some other things we want to hit on that Bitcoin ties into. But yeah, until then, appreciate anyone that's listening. And I'm gonna say it. If you could like, subscribe, follow, do all the things on YouTube, on Spotify, whatever it is. Just if you could help us out, be greatly appreciated. But thanks for listening, and we'll catch you soon.